Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. General Hospital. Rick's daring rescue after knife attack. Back to basement drama. After Ava administered a sleeping pill to Rick, she left Alexis to her work. She was assuming Rick was securely restrained in the basement. This task was related to Monica Quartermaines, Leslie Charlson, upcoming will reading. Unbeknownst to them, Rick had been working on loosening his restraints, and finally escaped after Ava's departure. The situation escalates dramatically when Rick sneaks up on Alexis, holding a knife to her throat as she relaxes on the sofa. This terrifying ordeal is likely to trigger PTSD in Alexis. It may remind her of a similar traumatic experience with her late ex-husband, Julian Jerome, William DeVry. Adding to the trauma, Alexis also witnessed Helena Cassadine, Constance Towers, murder her mother years ago. A brutal act involving a dagger to the throat. Ava Jerome's timely intervention and Rick Lansing's recapture on GH. Despite the shock of Rick's escape, spoilers suggest Ava has impeccable timing. It's predicted that Ava will return to Alexis's house and find Rick menacing her with a knife. Given Ava's fierce nature, it's highly probable she'll intervene. She may overpower Rick and save Alexis. Known for her resourcefulness, Ava might even be carrying a concealed weapon, a tactic she's employed before. It's anticipated that Ava and Alexis will manage to subdue Rick and drag him back to the basement and secure him with double the duct tape and a ball gag. While Rick's escape attempt is thwarted, his time in captivity may not be over. He has a significant amount of karmic retribution to face, and this attack on Alexis is unlikely to lead to his immediate release on General Hospital. Who will discover Rick Lansing's captivity on General Hospital? Once Rick is secured, there's a possibility that someone else might discover his captivity in Alexis's basement before his captors decide to release him. The question remains, would this discoverer set him free, or leave him to his fate? It's highly likely that someone will find Rick. So, perhaps they'll hear noises from the basement and investigate, only to be shocked by the sight of Rick bound and gagged. Sonny Corinthos, Maurice Bernard, who is often at Alexis' place, could be a potential discoverer. Given his animosity towards his half-brother Rick, Sonny would likely find the situation amusing and leave him to his predicament, perhaps even telling Alexis, "Good job." Carly Corinthos Spencer, Laura Wright, might also visit Alexis, especially since both are suspects in Drew Kane Quartermaines, Cameron Matheson, shooting. If Carly were to find Rick, it would be a moment of ultimate irony. Viewers may recall Rick holding a pregnant Carly captive in 2003, attempting to steal her baby. Carly would undoubtedly relish seeing Rick in such a vulnerable state, a fitting karmic payback. Other potential discoverers include Jason Morgan, Steve Burton, Michael Corinthos, Rory Gibson, and Nina Reeves, Cynthia Watrose. Jason would likely roll his eyes and walk away. Michael, while possibly asking questions, would not alert the authorities or help Rick. Nina, being best friends with Ava, would also likely find the situation amusing and leave Rick to his fate, possibly even joking about it. The unlikely rescuer and worst-case scenarios. The best-case scenario for Rick would be if Molly Lansing Davis, Kristen Vaganos, discovered him, as she might be the only one with close ties to his captors who would consider releasing him. However, most people in Port Charles harbor ill feelings towards Rick. Elizabeth Weber, Rebecca Herbst, might potentially help Rick. But the odds of her finding him are low, as she doesn't frequent Alexis's house. The worst-case scenario for Ava, Alexis, and Christina would be if Anna Devane, Finola Hughes, Dante Falconeri, Dominic Zamprogna, or Chase, Josh Swickard, discovered Rick during their investigation into Drew's shooting. While they might untie Rick, they might also choose to ignore the situation, similar to how they previously overlooked Michael's assault on Drew. Given the leverage they all have on each other, Rick might be forced to concoct a story about a consensual BDSM encounter gone wrong. The storm rolling over Port Charles had the hospital buzzing with tension. Nurses hurried through the corridors, sirens wailed outside, and the night air carried a sense of dread. Yet the true storm was brewing not in the sky, but deep within the hospital's basement, a place far too familiar with Rick Lansing's demons. Rick had sworn he'd never set foot in the hospital basement again. Too many ghosts lingered there. Memories of Elizabeth's captivity, of the chains, the threats, the broken man he once was. But fate has a twisted sense of irony, and on this night, Rick would once again find himself standing in the shadows of his past, This time, not as the villain, but as the savior. The attack. The chaos began upstairs in the parking structure. Trina Robinson had been leaving her late shift at the gallery, her head full of worries about Spencer, when a masked man emerged from behind a pillar. In the dim glow of the flickering light, the man lunged forward, knife flashing in his hand. Trina screamed, struggling against him, but the attacker's grip was ironclad. Just as the blade came dangerously close to her, Rick Lansing, who had been returning from a meeting with Alexis, sprang into action. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply lunged, tackling the man to the ground. The knife grazed Rick's arm, leaving a hot sting of pain, but his focus was unshakable. Years of living in the shadows of sunny Corintho's world had taught him survival. He twisted the man's wrist, sending the knife clattering to the ground, and slammed his attacker against the concrete. But before Rick could finish the fight, the man shoved him back with surprising force and bolted. Trina, shaken and pale, clung to Rick's arm. "He's heading inside," she gasped. "We have to stop him." Descent into darkness. Security alarms echoed as Rick and Trina chased the attacker down a stairwell. The man moved with precision, as though he knew the hospital's layout intimately. And that's when it hit Rick, whoever this was, they wanted to vanish in the one place people rarely ventured, the basement. Trina's eyes darted nervously as they descended. "Why would anyone go down here?" she whispered. Rick's jaw clenched. "Because basements hide secrets. And this hospital's got plenty of them." When they reached the bottom floor, the atmosphere changed. The hum of machines faded into eerie silence. The flickering bulbs overhead threw long shadows across peeling paint and forgotten equipment. For Rick, every step was a flashback. He could still hear Elizabeth's cries, the sound of chains rattling, the weight of guilt that had never fully lifted. But this time, Rick told himself, he wasn't the monster. Tonight, he was going to make things right. The trap. They cornered the attacker in an abandoned storage room filled with rusting gurneys and broken floor stands. The man's mask slipped, revealing a face Rick recognized instantly. Dalton Briggs, a disgraced former orderly fired years ago for theft and rumored connections to Cyrus Renault. "Dalton," Rick spat, his voice low with contempt. "You picked the wrong night to come crawling back. Funny coming from you, Lansing. You think you're a hero now? You'll always be the guy who locked Elizabeth in chains." His words dripped with venom, and Trina's wide eyes shifted to Rick with shock. For a split second, Rick froze, the shame of his past stabbing deeper than Dalton's knife ever could. But then, as Dalton lunged with a second blade pulled from his boot, Rick shoved Trina behind him and fought with everything he had. The two men slammed into shelves, sending metal clattering. Rick grappled with Dalton, their breaths ragged, every movement echoing in the basement chamber like a drumbeat. Rick's redemption. It was raw, desperate combat. No finesse, no careful calculation. Just survival. Dalton managed to slice Rick's shoulder, crimson staining his shirt. Rick roared through the pain, grabbing a nearby four-pole and swinging it like a bat, knocking Dalton to the ground. Dalton scrambled to his feet, snarling, but Rick was faster. With a final surge of strength, Rick pinned him against the wall, his forearm pressing hard into Dalton's throat. "You're done," Rick growled, his voice shaking with fury and resolve. Trina grabbed the fallen knife, her hands trembling but steady enough to keep Dalton in check until security arrived. For once, Rick wasn't the man who hurt the innocent. He was the man who stopped the blade. Aftermath in the basement. By the time Jordan Ashford and Curtis arrived with backup, Dalton was restrained, his schemes cut short. But the true weight of the night lingered in the basement air. Trina looked at Rick with a complicated mix of gratitude and unease. "You saved me," she whispered. "But what he said, was it true?" Rick exhaled, his gaze dropping to the cracked concrete floor. "Yes. Years ago, I did things I'll never forgive myself for. I hurt people. I hurt Elizabeth. I became everything I hated about Sonny, about my father. And I've carried that shame every day since. But tonight I had the chance to do something different." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Trina nodded slowly. "People can change. You just proved that." Upstairs fallout. Word of Rick's daring rescue spread through the hospital like wildfire. Elizabeth herself overheard the whispers, her breath catching in her throat when she realized Rick had once again been in the basement. But this time, not as her tormentor, but as Trina's protector. Later, when Rick sat in the ER having his wound stitched, Elizabeth appeared at the curtain. Their eyes met, and an unspoken history passed between them. "You didn't have to do it," Elizabeth said softly. "Yes, I did," Rick replied, his voice hoarse but steady. "Maybe I'll never make peace with who I was. But tonight, I made peace with who I want to be." Elizabeth studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "For what it's worth, you saved someone important to me. That means something." The cliffhanger. As Dalton was escorted out in cuffs, he shouted one final warning. "You think this is over?" The basement was just the beginning. There are more secrets buried down there than you can imagine. And when they come out, Port Charles won't survive. The word sent a chill through everyone. What else lay hidden beneath the hospital's foundations? Was Dalton bluffing, or had Rick and Trina just stumbled into a much larger conspiracy? Rick, clutching his bandaged arm, stared into the shadows of the stairwell. He knew Dalton wasn't lying. The basement had always been a place of darkness, and tonight had only scratched the surface. For Rick Lansing, redemption had come at a price, and the past wasn't done with him yet.